Okay, good evening, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's Overview and Scrutiny Committee held here at the Town Hall in Bexhill on the 6th of July at 6 o'clock. We are recording, so there we are. First item on the agenda, item 1, minutes. Do I have your authorisation as chairman to sign the minutes of the meeting of this committee held on the 1st of June 2026 as a correct record of the proceedings?
So moved.
Thank you very much. Item 2, apologies and substitutions. Louise, any apologies?
Councillor Byrne sent his apologies and Councillor McLaren is online.
Yep, see that. And we also have Cabinet Portfolio for Planning, Teresa Colleen online as well. And a couple of additional members over there. Welcome, gentlemen. Additional agenda items. There are none. Item 3. Item 4, disclosure of interest and dispensations. To receive any disclosure by members of disclosable pecuniary interest, other registrable interest, non-registrable interest in matters on the agenda and the item of the interest and details of any dispensations obtained. Members are reminded to repeat this declaration immediately prior to commencement of the item in general. I wouldn't think there are any. Councillor Barnes.
I think just for the sake of transparency, I register that I'm a member of Etchingham Parish Council. I take no part in planning discussions there, though.
I can't see that that's relevant, to be honest.
I'm sorry you find it irrelevant, but I'm also a member of Etchingham Parish Council and I take no part in planning applications and decisions.
Similarly, Battletown Council, I take no part in planning.
Still can't see it was relevant. There it is.
And Chair for the Battletown Council as well, if we're going down that route. Thank you.
Right. Yeah, and Rye and Battle and anyone else. I personally, I don't think it's relevant, but there it is. On to the main item on the agenda this evening, which will be the local enforcement plan, pages 3 to 26. Local enforcement plan received the report to present the draft local enforcement plan for recommendation and approval by Cabinet and onward approval and adoption by full council. Officer recommendation resolved that, subject to any comments of overview and scrutiny of this of the committee, that the appropriate formatting of the document, Cabinet be requested to agree that the local enforcement plan be recommended to council for approval and adoption. You'll remember that you first got sight of this on the 20th of May when the final draft came out, so I sent it round to all members. I had a number of emails over the weekend and phone calls with regard to this item. So there it is. Mike, do you wish to take this one, or is Teresa going to... You go first? Okay.
Yes, I'll go first, Chair, if that's okay. Good evening, members. You've obviously got the local enforcement plan in front of you, as Councillor Osborne has described. A relatively short document, but hopefully an opportunity to explain how the planning enforcement system works. It is a fairly complex system, and this attempts to break it out into fairly easy to understand paragraphs. It's important to say that, this is just one part of our enforcement strategy. I would argue more importantly than this, we recruited an additional enforcement officer in December of last year, which has made a real difference to the service that we can offer. And the number of open cases has gone down by about 20% in a year. That's not the number of new cases coming in. If anything, planning enforcement is a growing service rather than a reducing service, but the number of applications on hand has reduced. We also, as a local planning authority, issue 2-week updates on planning enforcement cases to our parish and town councils. That's highly unusual for a local planning authority to do that. So we are more transparent than most in that respect, I would suggest. There are also, it's fair to say, and I've had discussions with many of you around this, there are England-specific issues with the planning enforcement system in this country. It does take a long time. For example, if we serve an enforcement notice at the moment now, it will take about 2 years for the planning inspectorate to hear that enforcement notice. Where we do prosecute, then the fines generally are in the low thousands. That is not Rother's fault. That is a system that we've got to operate within. The other thing is important to say, and in the actual local enforcement plan, paragraph 3 has given rise to some comment, and Councillor Osborne sort of mentioned phone calls and emails. It is a discretionary system. We as local planning authority have got the ability to choose what we enforce, what we don't enforce. It is a discretionary system. It's also, very importantly, it's a system in England that's aimed at resolving breaches. It's not intended to be a punitive system. It's there to resolve breaches rather than necessarily to punish. Apart from the most serious breaches, where we will progress to formal enforcement action, most cases we attempt to resolve by negotiation. We're not unusual in that. That's the approach that most local planning authorities in this country take. It's also generally the quickest form of action that we can take, not in all circumstances. Where we take formal planning enforcement action, and we do take formal planning enforcement action, we've got to make sure that that action is justified, that it's reasonable, that it's consistent. We have to take the emotion that sometimes exists in planning enforcement matters out and look at the facts of the case. If we fail to do that, then we're open to fairly significant costs at appeal, and we're also open to the risk of legal action. I'm pleased to report that as a planning authority, our appeal record is very good, within the top quarter of the country, I would suggest, at about 80% dismissed, and we have very rare awards of costs against us. So as authority, our record on this is pretty good. In terms of the local enforcement plan, there have been several parish councils, it's fair to say, have raised some concern that they weren't consulted on this document. What I would say, I'd probably make 2 comments, if I may, Chair, in response to that. The first one is that we're not required to consult on this document. There's no requirement to do so. My second comment, which perhaps is hopefully a little bit more helpful than that, is that we are, senior officers, including myself, the Chief Executive, are meeting the Rother Association of Local Councils on Wednesday. They've expressed some concern that they weren't consulted on this document as well. So through this, there could be a short period for parish town councils to comment, but what we're looking for here as an overview and scrutiny committee is your comments as members. I look forward to those comments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. What I will remind, before we get into a debate, what I will remind members is I don't want to go down the route of specific cases, because that's not what we're discussing. We're discussing the plan. I know there's been mention of a deferment. I would prefer not to go down that route simply because of timescales. Our next meeting is extremely packed agenda already. We're probably looking at October, I expect. Yeah, which would be October. Then you've got to go through cabinet. So we're not going to get to council until almost the end of the year to get it signed off. And we may well be gone by the following May. So that would be a concern. Hopefully, some of the sort of questions have been answered in that Mike and the team are meeting with Lorna, meeting parish councils on Wednesday. So any sort of inklings they've got from there or points of view or whatever can be taken on board and added to what we have to say this evening. And then hopefully we can get it through cabinet and on to council. So who wants to kick off? Councillor Maynard?
Thank you very much, Chairman, and thank you very much for the report, and I think that all members would welcome the broad approach of the report. I think that as local members, a number of us have been contacted, and to be fair, Chairman, it's not only parish and town council allures and indeed clerks and indeed members of those respective authorities, whilst they don't have obviously the ability to legally to obviously, other than commenting on on planning applications, they have an enormous interest in enforcement in their respective parishes, because when you certainly have a number of difficult enforcement cases within a particular parish, they can particularly mushroom into very serious issues. And I think for those of us who have been on the authority a very long time, we've all had personal experience of that and just how irate residents can be. So I think I certainly welcome the report. I disagree with you, Chairman, in terms of deferment, because I think it's best to make the right decision that, from the public perception point of view, stacks up. And I actually think that in terms of those individual cases that I know that members would like to discuss with Mike and the team, I think it actually that there are two things that we could do. I think we could informally contact the parishes. Okay, we have the meeting as you've described on Wednesday, but that's not each and every parish and town council within the district of Rother. I think it's really important at this time, especially, not in spite of, especially as we are moving forward in terms of the unitary proposition. I think we want to be clear and open and transparent. And I'm not suggesting we haven't been, but I think it's really important that we engage with our parishes and take them with us on this, because I think from a parish perspective, it's hugely important. Parish councillors get their ear bent, and I know some of you are parish councillors, whether it be in district councillors, but enforcement cases are, as I've already said, really, really difficult. And we genuinely appreciate the amount of work that officers put in, but I think it's absolutely essential. I don't think we should rush this. And I'm not suggesting that we are, but I don't think we should be hauled over the coals simply because time is of the essence, because I don't think it is, because I don't think that it is right to make a decision without involving everybody. I'm not suggesting for a moment, Chairman, we have a statutory consultation period. We don't need to do that. But what I am suggesting is that we do contact all of our parishes to get that information back. Then there are two ways that we could take it forward. We could either have a one-off meeting of a task and finish group where you could really distill those issues that have been brought in, both in terms of officer interface and member interface. I don't think it needs to be more than one meeting. But I know from colleagues that I've spoken to over the past couple of weeks, when this paper was first mooted, it came to us in June, but when this paper this time was coming before us, I know that members are extremely exercised about the issue of enforcement. I think that we need to demonstrate both to parish and town councils and the public. I mean, I've had a long representation from a resident in Fairlight about one particular issue. The public are concerned about enforcement. Yes, it isn't a statutory service, but they are really concerned. And I think in terms of our reputation as a council, and it's not a political comment, this is a genuine comment about the reputation of this authority, getting it right is far more important than rushing it through. And if, despite the fact that I hear what you, Chairman, you've said, the perception is that we haven't consulted, and that perception needs to be put to the test by consulting parish and town councils, by allowing them to have the interface into this. And we can do that very simply by deferring the meeting, the paper today, but also, and I know other members will want to speak, whether we look into the opportunity of having a one-off task and finish group to look at this further, garnering all that information, working with officers. I don't think it's an enormous piece of work that members will be requested to do, but I think it then gives members the opportunity to also speak with their parish and town councils and bring their concerns forward. Thank you, Chairman.
Before I take Councillor Barnes, what was the timescale, perceived timescale for this? Was this to go to Cabinet? I see this next Cabinet is 27th of this month.
think it was September unless Mike knows otherwise. Is that right, Mike?
So the original intention was to take it to Cabinet later in July, but I think given my comment around what I said about giving Rauch an opportunity to comment, I think it would be more likely to be later than that. What I would say, hearing Councillor Maynard's comments, I think there is still an opportunity for you as members to give your comments here so that we can move on with this. Thank you, Chair.
I suppose if I can see that if we was trying to try and go for the end of this month, then that's tight. If we're now looking at September, I know we have August when there's very little goes on in the council, except for me, who seems to continue working at most times, not council, I have to add, but working normally. Would that give time if there was we did have members for a task and finish group. Now, would that give time for a single meeting that could be arranged soon as, that then they have the opportunity to invite parish councillors or representatives of Rauch or whatever? And then that shouldn't impact too much on the time and we can get it to September Cabinet. If that's, you know, but equally, would the committee want to make, as Mike has said, the committee can make their representations to this now, and then the task and finish group can dial down, or do we want to leave it to a task and finish group to do the work for us and come up with, you know, but you know, I would say hopefully just an afternoon meeting would do it with whoever you wish to invite. I'm looking at Councillor Mrs Barnes because she was going to be the chair of the task and finish group. So your husband will have to wait whilst I invite Councillor Mrs Barnes to speak.
Chairman, I think it's absolutely essential that this is done properly and that all questions are answered. And I think it's absolutely vital that the parish councils have got to have as much of a say as they want. After all, and it's absolutely true, I think you said that, you know, we're going to be going into a unitary authority. We want to make certain that parish councils have actually got it all in a row, you know what they're doing. I'm not entirely sure because I don't know if we're all here, but I think we really need to make sure that if we have this discussion today, and I don't know how long you would be allowing for that before we go into the task and finish group, whether that would work or whether it would be better to actually say, let's have one task and finish group, see how it goes, and hope that we will have Mike there just to make certain that we've got it. And whatever else happens, I think we have got to remain completely united in whatever the final outcome is. I think my husband has some other points that he wishes to make first. So I think before we go on to brass tacks, can we just hear what everybody else is saying before we finally decide?
Yeah, so this is what I'm trying to get to. If we can, we've got this to discuss tonight as a committee. So you want to discuss this as a committee, then we'll leave it to potentially a task and finish group to speak to the parishes. Yes, no? I don't know.
It would be helpful, Chair, if I may, to name who the members of the task and finish group were. There may be other councillors who might want to go on to that. I don't know, that might not be the case, but it'd be helpful if you could just run the names.
Louise is now drastically looking because it was set up probably 18 months ago. So hopefully everybody who put their name down is still here. Councillor, yeah, John, come in and have your say.
We're stumbling over procedure, and I suspect at the moment we need to come back at the end to see whether you want to reappoint the task and finish, maybe with slightly different membership. I don't think you're going to be able to avoid deferment altogether however we term it, because clearly you may get some comments on Wednesday, but you may well find that a number of parish clerks will want to make contact in any case. One parish clerk wrote to me and asked me to make the point tonight that really successful enforcement is the key to the integrity of the planning system. And that, of course, is the very first sentence in the MPPF relevant paragraph. So I think whatever we say tonight, I think there has got to be an opportunity for some further discussion. Like you, I don't think it need hold us up very long, because at the end of the day, I suspect some of this is more about individual cases that have taken ages, rather than the policy being enormously at fault. I'll come back to that. But it does seem to me that we can probably still get to somewhere in September, even if we actually take our time at this stage. How you formally authorise that, whether we delegate authority to the task force or possibly even to you as chairman, subject to there being reasonable consensus around the findings, I think is a different matter. But I think certainly to defer and allow us to make our points and allow the clerks to make their points, and parish councillors, some will, some won't, but the clerks will nearly always have a view. And we are dealing with bodies corporate, so in a sense, the clerks can speak for their parish councils. I hope that's helpful up to a point. There's a lot more I would want to say, but really I'm on procedure at the moment.
I think equally, John, that you almost sort of touched on it, that our job this evening is to scrutinise the enforcement plan, this document we have in front of us. And you touched on individual cases, but that's not what we're doing.
That's precisely.
So that, and that's the same, to me, it's the same as if we have a small task and finish group, quick meeting. We will be telling them to work on this document, not on individual cases.
Chairman, I think you've misunderstood me. I was saying, I think some of the perception out there, and I think we've got to be quite blunt, and I think Lauren will remember this from the feedback after the last election. Enforcement was a major issue on the doorstep. And out there, the perception is that we don't enforce. I don't think it's a correct perception, but that is the perception. I think that's probably based more on certain well-known cases than actually on the reality. And I can take you to cases where I've seen action taken and taken very successfully. So it's a mixed picture probably, because there are, we all know, in certain parishes, there are cases, some of which have been going on for 20 years. And they're the ones that, in a sense, need to be resolved away from this committee. What we're talking about is policy. And to my mind, the weakness of the document as written at the moment, not so much the substance, because it's all there, but we have a habit of writing about the non-controversial norm. And then at the last moment, in a lot of paragraphs, having defended the fact we take a lot of time, we negotiate, all of that which is true and appropriate in the large majority of cases. But we then suddenly stick in a sentence at the end which says, nevertheless, if it's a serious case, we will take action. I prefer myself to begin with the spear and go to the shield later. In other words, to say up front that where there is a serious breach, particularly around listed buildings, which is a criminal offence, we will take action in virtually every case. You obviously have to leave yourself a little bit of wiggle room. And then come to the generality, where I think it's quite right to explain that in a large majority of cases, negotiation is the right way forward, because some will be rationalised by a retrospective planning. Others will, in fact, be compliance of one kind or another. And there are very successful examples of that. But I think begin with the spear each time and then the shield later, because the shield bit is not really that controversial. What people want is the surety that a swan in the house, to use one example, is not going to recur.
Can I just go to the Chief Executive first?
Thank you, Chair. I think this is an interesting plan because it's a bit different from other policies that the Council adopts where it has, or a strategy where it has the option of A or B and we go out and consult and people can shape and inform it. I think with this plan, actually it is a communication tool as well. It is about setting out the expectations of what we can do within the resources that we have. And I think our planning enforcement team and our head of planning and our development manager understand that resource better than certainly I do. So I think what we've got before us is, a carefully put together piece of work that sets out what those expectations are. And what I'm concerned about, and perhaps we haven't really used the word consultation too much, but I'm concerned we're going to raise expectation in doing this and then not be able to deliver that. So I think it is good to hear the views of people on this, but I also think that on something like this, where it's very much setting out what the law says and what our approach is to that and what's sort of doable within the resources that we have, is, really going to raise unrealistic expectations of what can change about individual cases. And I know that's not what you mean, Councillor Barnes, but I do fear as people add their comments to this, their minds will be focused on those individual cases rather than the overall approach and what the law says. So I think we need to be quite careful about that. And the other thing about this is we've done the main thing. As Mike said in his introduction, we've put additional resource into this team. I'm really, really keen for the team to be able to get on with this job. If we're servicing task and finish groups and dealing with a lot of responses from parish and town councils that can't influence our approach, actually, they're not about the content of the plan. That won't be using our resources wisely. I'm also really mindful of how long we've got left as an authority. And just because we adopt this doesn't mean it will be what's adopted by the new council when it comes into being in April 2028. So what's really important is getting the most out of our team at this time and making sure their resources are focused in the right place. So I just wanted, that's sort of my view on this. But I do appreciate that there may be comments that we can take into account and respond to quite quickly, and that would be my preferred approach on this.
Can I just say one thing about capacity, because and this we could explore, I think. I'm not sure whether legalities allow it or not, but one of the things that takes up a lot of the team's time is, in fact, having started the process, they suddenly find they're facing FOI requests, endless queries about where you've got to, and updating. It seems to me one way we could save the team a lot of time is by writing a single update to the parish clerk to go on the parish website. That way, you wouldn't be batting off individuals. You would still be communicating. There will be a single point of contact in the parish, and it will be the clerk and the website, which would convey a lot. I wouldn't therefore publicise the name of the planning enforcement officer, because I would use the parish clerk to communicate how progress is going on that particular enforcement application. If that's legal, that would seem to me to save time.
Would you know the answer to that, Mike?
Yeah, so certainly parish clerks can be a really important part of our liaison with communities. And we can't take away people's statutory rights. They've got a right to do freedom of information requests. And there is a line in the document, forgive me, I forget what paragraph, where we say that in certain really high-profile cases, then we will make use of a single point of contact. Because otherwise what happens, we'll get 100 emails, and we'll actually be dealing with those emails rather than the actual breach. And where that's something that's really time-sensitive, that's really not good. So we would use parish clerks in those circumstances. Thank you.
Okay, right. I will take Councillor Clark, then Councillor Maynard, then Councillor Thomas. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. I will be brief. First of all, it was all agreed that this item would come to this committee. Is that not correct? The only thing I have an issue with, it might well be that we don't have to consult statutory, but surely it's good practice, because this enforcement plan will affect all the local parishes, and they are expected, we would expect them to have a view, be a part of that process. So I think whichever way you want to work it, we need to get the views of the parish clerks, because otherwise it's we're stepping back and saying we deal with it and we don't have to talk to you. Language isn't correct for me, even if we don't mean it like that. That's the way it looks. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Maynard.
Thank you. Notwithstanding what we've heard about, obviously I appreciate officer concerns about time constraints, I appreciate officer concerns about resource, but I also know that as local members, the importance of this particular issue. And I know that we won't be talking about 6 months of meetings, we're talking about a one-off meeting to discuss those matters. So I'm afraid that I will get the ball rolling by moving deferment on this item and to set off a task and finish group, which obviously we'll talk about the names in a moment, but that should be obviously within the timescales that we've spoken about. And then I think the public perception, whether or not we raise expectations or not, that is a risk that is worth taking, because I think our reputation with the parish councils isn't brilliant as a district council, and I'll say that here now. And I think we can do this is an occasion where instead of firefighting as local members, we can be seen to doing the right thing. So I'll move deferment, Chairman, to get it on the ball rolling.
Thank you. I assume there's many people wish to second that. Probably Councillor Creaser and Councillor Barnes and probably Councillor Burton. Councillor Thomas, you wish to say something?
Thank you, Chair. First, I'd like to just say my own perception of the enforcement team. It is, in my personal opinion, my first experience, not everybody's may be the same, is it's actually been very effective. And I think one of the reasons why the public doesn't appreciate it is because it's often done quietly. It's done behind the scenes. It's done through private conversations, which often work remarkably well. And although I've come across examples of developers that are very stubborn and uncooperative, I've come across examples too of developers that are very open to what the planning department has to say. That's just general remark. The second thing I want to say is that I do agree with Councillor Maynard, Councillor Clark and Councillor Barnes about the importance of consultation with parish and town councils. And I think there's a particular reason why that's so important, and that is with LGR coming down the line, the role of the planning advisory committees of these small councils will become very much more important. And particularly in this particular area, where almost every single parish has a neighbourhood plan, I think it's important we consult people about how that will be enforced. So for those reasons, I agree with those remarks. And I think the idea of the one-off meeting, I think, is very realistic. At the same time, I would like us to have the chance to express our opinions at this meeting, because that's, after all, why we've come here. And so, although I would be, quite happy with the kind of motion. I wouldn't like that to see the end of what we could say today. I think as a committee, we're entitled to put our tuppence worth in. Thank you, Chair.
Have you found the list, Louise?
I don't have access to that information at the moment. I'm afraid this is not my laptop. I can't get that sort of information for you, but I can obviously look at after the meeting.
Well, the chairwoman, Councillor Barnes, is looking equally. I kept thinking Councillor McLaren, but I don't think she was on the council then. To be honest, Councillor Burton, did you have your name down for it?
No, I'm not a planning
Someone
expert.
did. Councillor Creasy, did you have your name down for it?
Recently, yeah.
That's all right.
Not at the
Right,
beginning.
there's two of you.
No, I wanted to speak.
Right,
sorry.
I'll let Councillor Burton speak. Councillor Burton.
Thank you. So
So you can.
I'm happy to second this motion, but I wanted to explain why that is. Listened carefully to Mike, and the key thing he said was we've appointed another officer and it's making a big difference, which shows that they've got a good document already that people before me worked on. And so the work will carry on in a constructive way and we've had positive feedback from Councillor Thomas. I hear what our Chief Executive says and about the urgency of time. I do appreciate that. But we also said, but the town and parish councils are the ones that are going to be at the front of dealing very often dealing with queries, particularly where you have an office, as we do in Battle, and officers are there every morning. So they do. So I would feel very reluctant to even discuss today the content of this report without their input, because I think it could be enhanced with their input. And tight timescale, absolutely with you. Not extra this, that, and the other, but tight timescale that we can adhere to would be my proposal.
Okay, Councillor Creaser.
I'd like to suggest that it would be a really good idea to have what Councillor Maynard has said. If for no other reason, we would have the opportunity to clarify what we're trying to do here and for have a discussion with that, because there may well be where people have got this just sort of suddenly appeared. It hasn't, but that's how they seem to feel. And to be able to discuss it a little bit like that. I don't think that there is necessarily any massive changes that could be made, because this is a very good document. However, what we do need to do is to make sure that everybody feels as if they are engaged with it, because it affects everybody. So I would very much like to do something along that. And I would also like to join, if I'm not already been thinking, the other thing I was going to say was, if you can't find the names from before, why don't we start a new bunch of names today? And one of them could be me. So, thank you.
Chairman, that's not a silly suggestion. I think time may have moved on and commitments of councillors may have moved on. We've got other councillors, obviously, from not just the Conservative Party. We've got Councillor Meyer sitting at the back there, and I think that to have a small but effective group, I think, would be exactly what we should be doing.
Right. I have the original list. Oh, that's one. Right. So we have Councillor Jimmy Strenger expressed an interest. Councillor Andrew Mear. Councillor Andrew Mear expressed an interest. Councillor Mark Legg expressed an interest. Councillor Mrs. Kirby Green. Councillor Brian Drayson. Councillor Tony Biggs. Councillor Mrs. Mary Barnes. Tony Biggs is now saying, what do I put my hand up for? Councillor Legg also thinking, what do I put my hand up for?
Exactly. I'm on a list, and I think I probably shouldn't be on a list now as chair.
That's fair enough. That's fair enough. Oh. If I are, in a minute, when I'm set.
Chair, I'm really sorry to interrupt. May I ask you to repeat the list?
Do you want me to?
Go on. Yep.
So Councillor Mary Barnes is chair, Councillor Biggs, Councillor Drayson, Councillor Kirby-Green, Councillor Legg, Councillor Mear, Councillor Stanger.
That is obviously not set in stone and is subject to change. So that was a starting point, and I think that was a long time ago, wasn't it? That was probably a good 18 months ago. So,
Through you, Chairman, if there's anybody else in the room that wants to put their name forward, I think now's the time for them to do that.
This is it. So, yeah, go on then, speak. Yeah, I know that. All right, well, look, it looks like...
Sorry, interrupt again. Can you reconfirm the time frames for getting this work done?
By September, by the end of September.
Yeah, I think it was actually the original plan, it would go through to the July Cabinet meeting, but now if it's September, I think we said the deadline for September meeting was the 4th of September is the actual dispatch day, so the work would have to be done over the summer holidays in August. So that might be quite tricky getting people together from a practical point of view.
Well, Chair, can I say I am willing, but if you've got, it depends whether you need more people. I'm around in August, if that's the time frame.
Okay, your name is on the list. Right. Well, it looks like the route we're taking is a quick, small task and finish group, hopefully with one meeting, and it's got to report back by probably the 3rd week of August to make the early September.
Yeah, just to correct that actually, Chair, because that is the Cabinet date, but if it's got to come back here, which it would do if it was task and finish group, we are then looking at the 7th of September is too full, as we've just discussed, and actually the timescales for that would be even more challenging, wouldn't they, Louise? So we're probably looking at the 12th of October, and the dispatch date for that is the 2nd of October. So I think we probably still want to be meeting over that August period, so because it's obviously got to be a report, and yeah, so the report would need to be done by the 18th of September.
Right, there you have it. Councillor Mrs Cook.
Chairman, if the members of this committee feel so strongly about this, then perhaps we could call a one-item meeting of the overview and scrutiny, following on from the task and finish group to scrutinise it, so it can go to Cabinet in September.
Yeah, Mike, over to you.
Thank you. I'm conscious I might not make myself very popular, which is I'm a town planner. I'm used to that. So, and I do accept this is obviously for members to decide, but and officers to advise. I think just a couple of comments that I would make. You know, we're in the midst of the local plan process at the moment, so I'm not immediately keen on a one-off overview scrutiny. I accept that's your decision. I also think that, you know, it has been out amongst overview and scrutiny members since end of May. So, you know, at this point, I would sort of respectfully sort of say, if you have got comments, and some of you have, to be fair, let me know, because I can't change the document until I've got your comments. The other thing I think, I just want to be clear, I think what we're saying, if this motion is carried, is that there'll be a very short, focused consultation with parish and town councils. Then when you've got the results of that, there will then be a member task and finish group where you can consider their comments. To do all that, as we're coming up to the holiday season, I very much stress that council officers will be very much working over the holiday period, but I'm conscious that parish councils have perhaps different meeting agenda timeframes. I think to do all that for September will be challenging. October is perfectly possible. Thank you.
Do we need to formally vote, Chairman? I think we ought to.
Yeah.
Moved it up.
Yep, right, well, if that's the case, all those in favour of the motion? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Any against? Councillor Cook, 1. I should abstain as chairman. So that's carried then. So what we will do, we've got to set this up now, haven't we? We need some names for this task and finish group now. So, Councillor Groner, was you interested? You are? Okay. So we can have Councillor Groner, we can have Councillor Creaser, Councillor Mrs Barnes, not getting away with it now. Councillor Andrew Mear?
Do what I can.
Yeah. Councillor Biggs? Yeah. Councillor McLaren as well? Yeah. Do you converse with your wife over this? Or is one Barnes enough on a committee?
I shall put evidence in.
No, I'm sure you will. You'll be doing a written response from Mrs Barnes. Right, how many names is that?
I think we've got
That's plenty.
7.
That's
Yeah.
plenty.
Yeah.
Okay,
Louise has got them. Yeah.
can you just run through them, Louise, so we know? Just
So we have Councillor Groner, Creaser, Mrs Barnes, Councillor Mear, Biggs, McLaren and Mr Barnes.
Okay. Right. Okay. Right. We have set up a task and finish group. Whoever wants to chair it, probably Mrs Barnes, Councillor Mrs Barnes. Yeah, it looks like you've been nominated already. But that's that. Well, I didn't probably go according to your plan, Mike, but we have a way forward, I assume, which may well satisfy many people. So thanks for that. Item 6, work programme, pages. Councillor Thomas.
Sorry, I accept the motion has been carried, but does that mean that we, as people attending tonight, that we can't actually state opinions on the report? I personally I'm not proposing to be on the committee, but I have got 1 or 2 observations which maybe I should have made before, but I would like to share them with the committee before we move on to the next item.
Another meeting, another meeting.
It'll be coming back to us.
Coming back.
All right, in that case, all right,
Yeah.
fair enough. Yeah,
We're going to have a full
yeah.
committee.
Yeah, I think what could be, if you've got any comments, you can let Mike
To
know.
Mike privately, yeah.
It'll be coming back to us anyway. You can sit in or converse with the task and finish group if you wish. Give them your thoughts, and then we'll let the task and finish group do the work with the parishes, and then we can just sign it off.
Can we confirm that after the meeting?
Yeah.
We can do a bit of planning and work out.
We'll get a plan and we get an email out to everybody. If we keep the whole committee informed,
Yeah, we can do that.
then we can, that'd be bestest. Councillor Barnes?
Yes, and given this is policy, I think in some ways written representations from those members who want to put in are easier to cope with than discussion at this committee. So I would urge people to do what I've done, which is set out their thoughts in writing. I think that would be more helpful to the task force and to Mike.
Oh, yeah. Councillor Killeen, you're the unfortunate cabinet portfolio holder for this.
Yeah. Yes, I think it's very important that the task and finish group, and I think John's point is well made, need to stick to it being done in writing and to the elements that are in the policy, because it is a policy. It's not about being able to answer some of the frustrations that we know go on in parish councils and with parish clerks. And in all fairness, I would say this has been on the go for probably the 2 years I've been part of it, and therefore parish clerks and parishes via their district councillors presumably have been talking about this for a considerable amount of time. So I think I've had quite a lot of opportunity to bring forward any thoughts that they had via their district councillors. But your task and finish group may be able to pull some of those thoughts together. But I think, again, it's about, this is a process that is to be followed. It's a legislative process. So I don't think there's that much room for manoeuvre, but the task and finish group will see that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor McLaren, is that a new hand? You're muted as well.
No, it wasn't a new hand, but since you've asked me, I think I just will share my point of view that notwithstanding whether or not we technically get a lot of changes to the document, I wouldn't underestimate the value of the parish and town councils feeling heard on this very important matter to them. And I would hope that if we can pass on a policy well thought through that they feel they've had an influence over, then that could be a useful legacy item for the unitary for us to pass on. And I'll take my hand down now.
Okay. Right. That's it then. Oh, Councillor Mrs. Palms.
Just one thing, having listened to Councillor Colleen, that is, it may have been 2 years, but there's nothing quite like bringing all the thoughts together when we have something which we absolutely need them to have those statements in by a date. It's a dribble effect of 2 years long of whinging is not going to be the same as consolidated thought when it comes to getting our act together before we meet. And I do think that's important.
Yeah, well, we'll get some dates out by the end of the week. Yep. Okay. Good. Right. Thank you for that one. Right. Item 6 is the work programme. You'll see the next meeting. We have the Rotherham draft local plan, the Durham Ward Trust performance update, community asset transfer update, budget monitoring 26-27 revenue capital savings targets monitoring Q1 update and performance report first quarter. So that keeps us busy for 20 minutes. And then going on from that, we've got draft budget challenge proposals, review of progress against recommendations of health and wellbeing task and finish group, and this new enforcement task and finish group. And then all of a sudden it's November, which is the state of the district report, budget monitoring, savings, performance report, etc., usual bread and butter work. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chair. When I look at the work programme throughout the year, maybe it's just me, but I want to know when we're going to have a focus on a housing report, comprehensive one. Years ago, it was always in November, we used to get quite. We do get targets showing how many people in temporary accommodation, that sort of thing, but an actually encapsulated report of where we are with housing need, how we're dealing with temporary accommodation, how many people are only being housed outside the district, and how the finances are working with money from central government. We don't seem to have got nothing here this year that actually gives us a very clear picture of where we're going with housing. I don't know, just me, but sorry.
I think much of that is covered in the performance report. We did have items for consideration, review of the housing strategy. So when we've got a timetable for that, overall scrutiny, obviously part of that process. But I think, I mean, and also what we can do is look at those performance reports, and if it is a particular focus on housing that members want, then we can really focus in on those KPIs and the sort of the context in which they're operating in. So I think we can use that performance report to do that.
I think we could probably just ask Anna to, if we want to see some specific figures, and ask her to put a few together and go from there. That'd be the easiest way around, I think. Councillor Barnes?
Yes, I was thinking along similar lines, but to my neighbour, there are two types of housing reports which I think would be interesting. One is the sort which really is reflected in our performance measures, though not always, I think, quite as angled in quite the way I would be looking for. But the other is we have a major risk at which we fail every time. We can't do anything about it, and it affects our land supply position. And really probably the easiest way to inform us about that is when the State of the District report is made in November, possibly at that stage we could see a copy of the report that we make to government about the land supply position, which is, in other words, it's not extra work, but just making it available to this committee will be a way of informing us on what is the position in terms of building.
Does that get reported to planning?
Thank you, Chair. No, it doesn't get reported to Planning Committee. It is a public document, and we can report it as Councillor Barnes describes. I need to check on the exact timing, but it's no secret what our land supply position is. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Yep.
Thank you, Chair. The other opportunity to look at sort of the broader sort of context in which we're operating in is the State of the District report, which does have a section on housing and affordability and things like that. So I think that's the other place where this all comes together, and that gets reported in November.
Okay, right. Councillor Biggs.
Just a quick one. Mike's having a meeting on Wednesday with Ralph. Will this committee and the task force committee get an update of what went on Wednesday?
I think the intention would be to update RALC on these discussions. We've got a clear way forward, and to give them a short period to comment in writing. I think comments in writing, as Councillor Barnes described, are much more helpful. We need people to comment on paragraphs, what they want added, what they want excluded. But obviously we'll hear some of those concerns verbally. The emphasis will be on written representations with probably a very brief update on the meeting at the Task and Finish group. Thank you.
I think ultimately the Task and Finish group have the ability to invite representatives of parish councils if they wish. So we probably should, whether that's the chairman of RALC or a couple of see who's interested, basically. But that's within your gift. Well, if that's it, I'll call a meeting. Thank you very much for your attendance this evening. I'll call the meeting closed at 18:59 according to the iPad. Thank you very much for your attendance.